Hello, everybody. Looks like we've got a great group in here today. I'm Zandra, the community manager for CharmVerse and your host for today. So, if you're not familiar, CharmVerse is a Web3 community platform for managing members, coordinating tasks, facilitating decisions, and holding each other accountable. So, members sign in with crypto wallets and gain access via community tokens and NFTs. And it brings together onboarding, payment management, proposals, project trackers, and data repositories in one place. So if you've not checked it out, please do so. It is the Web3 community platform that you should be using. But don't go check it out just yet because we have a great Twitter space for you today. I am joined by Tara Collingwoode-Williams, who is an XR researcher, educator, and speaker, not to mention CharmVerse brand ambassador, and we're very happy to have her on board. So let's give her a warm welcome. Hey, Tara, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you, and very excited to be here.
Really happy to have you here. Listeners, so I first met Tara earlier this year in New York at a hackathon that she was participating in. And you had a great group of people that you were working with, and I really enjoyed meeting you and felt like we hit it off. And then shortly after that, you became a CharmVerse brand ambassador, which I was extra excited to hear about after meeting you months before. So now that I've learned even more about what you do, doing my research for this space, I'm really excited to share it with our listeners because it seems like you're doing some really fascinating things out there. So thanks so much for taking the time to be here.
No, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk about my work and yeah, discuss everything that I'm hoping to do with Charmverse in the future.
Fantastic. So I gotta say, I didn't know what this was, but so I'm gonna ask because I'm assuming some of our listeners don't. But I saw XR and I had no idea what that was. So what is XR?
Oh, sure, I can help you out with that. So, XR actually stands for extended reality. So it's an umbrella term for technologies enabling virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. And I know sometimes these terms can get a bit mixed up still. So I can just go further just to clarify quickly what those are as well. Virtual reality refers to experiences in which the user is effectively immersed in a responsive virtual world. Um, so looking at experiences that are engaged with maybe the Oculus headset or when you're completely isolated into a virtual space. And then we have augmented reality, technology that superimposes a computer-generated image on a user's view of the real world. So think Pokemon Go, think every time you take a selfie and you want to put a little filter on it on Instagram or Snapchat, that's all using augmented reality technology. And then we have mixed reality, and these days, mixed reality kind of describes environments which use real and virtual subjects and objects to interact in real time. So you can both interact with virtual and real components. So with these type of experiences, the headset either has a transparent lens or camera, so you can still see the real world. I hope that clears up a few things.
Yes, thank you. Because, yeah, I'm like, this is all pretty new to me. I'd heard of an Oculus. I knew a bit about VR, but the augmented reality and the mixed reality. So, I mean, so is the mixed reality like what we were hearing about? Like Apple might
Yes,
have these
exactly.
glasses
I
that
was
you
just
put on.
I was just about to mention
Okay.
we can't talk about kind of mixed reality and VR headsets without mentioning the Apple new Vision Pro unveiling that just happened recently, which I'm really excited about as well, because it means so much for more research within kind of spatial computing.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating. And just digging a little bit into what you're working on, it just seems like such a cool world to be
Thank
working
you.
in. It's really neat. So you focus on all three of these. These all kind of fit under the umbrella of XR.
Yeah, so as I'm a lecturer, I teach on a master's program at Goldsmiths University. We've just wrapping up a year of amazing, about 40 students, which have gone on to join amazing internships at a lot of different XR companies within London and research facilities. And I teach the development and methodology surrounding those technologies, but as a researcher. So I'm also in my write-up for my PhD, and that actually focuses specifically on VR and more specifically on embodiment in VR. So that's the term to explain the illusion of owning a virtual body in a virtual environment.
Okay, great. Yeah, because I definitely have that on my list of questions. So your specialty is really about that embodiment.
Yes, absolutely. It's on that aspect of uh, provoking that illusion of embodiment, but also looking at the psychological impact that that can have.
So that can be like the facial expression matching up with yours as you're playing, or body movement, or maybe not matching up with yours, but being able to give this character a facial expression or human like body movements, motions, things like that.
Yeah, so I guess there's a spectrum of how much your expressiveness can be displayed and depicted on your avatar. But I guess the interesting parts to look at is with those different elements of, or those different levels of that threshold, what are the impacts perhaps on your self representation and how you feel about yourself in VR, but also the projection of yourself that's been received by others in virtual spaces and what that means. Because even when we discuss and have conversation in real life, there's a lot of things happening subconsciously. So there's a lot of nonverbal communication, a lot of social cues that are being received and responded to. And it's interesting to see how that translates into a virtual space, and how we can, one, take advantage of the virtual space and having an avatar that might necessarily not look like us or actually look like us in this space to take advantage of some of those cues. Because sometimes, as we know, gaze, for example, how we look at each other, if we're staring or look away, it's kind of symbolized as turn taking. Even small things, or I guess things that we don't really specifically control in a conversation, such as height, that kind of dynamic can also gauge leadership and hierarchy in a space in virtual reality. And playing with those different attributes with your avatar can change the kind of dynamic of your conversations and your collaborations in VR. And not only just in terms of kind of social interaction, but in terms of your own self-embodiment as well. What's interesting about this space is how, and this is going off research that's been inspired by kind of really prominent researchers in this space, such as Mel Slater, who looks at kind of the idea of knowing yourself or becoming something else in virtual reality. And his research kind of really pushes this idea that VR could even change or impact racial bias. Embodying a body of a different skin color, of a different gender, can give you that experience of having, or just having an experience in someone else's in someone else's footsteps, or having a different perspective of a certain scenario in VR, or a social scenario in VR. I think one of his research looks at um, uh, looking at policing and how being a bystander in a scenario with a police having, being slightly having some racial prejudice against a suspect, and you witnessing that and then experiencing it from the position of that suspect, how that changes kind of your bystander behavior towards, police, let's say, attitudes towards different social groups. And so, yeah, it's a big space with so much to kind of explore, and which I just find very fascinating. And recently, my research is looking at how embodiment can also impact or help in medical scenarios, so medical communication training, and how using that idea of perspective, looking at things from different perspectives, can also um, help people to self-assess themselves within scenarios of that need them to kind of have that practice and have that time to deal with difficult scenarios. It's a study that's still ongoing, so I'm trying to say it without saying too much. But yes, ultimately there's a lot to unpack, and yeah, I'll just stop there before I tell you my whole thesis.
Well, it really is fascinating, and you can hear the passion in your voice. You're obviously excited about that, which is always lovely to hear. And I'm sitting here just like I'm just fascinated. It's so cool. And in my mind, it was like a gaming thing is what I thought of. And I'm not much of a gamer, full disclosure, but I figured it was like a gaming thing or a metaverse thing. But I really, just to touch back on what you were saying, one, whether it's you can have your avatar really represent you if that's what you want, but you could also have it, you could be embodying someone that may appear totally different than you, like you said, maybe taller, in embody someone that makes you feel more confident or more comfortable, and gives you that like internal power that maybe you don't feel you have in the real world. um, I,
Absolutely.
I think that's really beautiful. You can really go either way with that. I also find it really interesting because I didn't think about this, is having it be a way to identify with someone and step into their shoes in a way that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. I think that's a really good point. Um, and I never considered that. And I think that's a really important thing to call out and incredibly interesting. So, yeah, I really like how you're thinking about it. And I understand why you would be so excited. You're just kind of opening up this whole world for people to step into. So, you just kind of mentioned so wait, back it up a little bit. So, what are you doing here? I don't know what it's called. Is it like, I think of it as like body mapping, right? You have sensors kind of all over and you have these head mounted displays. Just tell us a bit about the process that goes into kind of figuring this out.
No, absolutely. So there's different, I guess, levels of immersion that can lead to setting up, I guess, technically for embodiment. So this is where the fun bit comes up, because I've had the experience of exploring motion capture and inverse kinematics using the Oculus Rift and hand controllers to kind of control my avatars. And so on one level, you can have, again, just embodiment set up with a Connect. So the Connect, um, standing in front of the Connect, and um, it kind of it you. But I guess the limitation in using the Connect is that you're only available to be tracked in line or in view of the sensors. Um, but it still kind of picks up a lot of your movement, and that was the basis of one of my first studies I done in my PhD, that looked at, I guess, the synchronization or consistency regarding lip and arm movement in virtual reality and how that impacts embodiment. I was really trying to understand, in terms of what is needed or what the attributes of embodiment. So I use the Connect, and that worked really well. And that's great because it's not very intrusive. You don't have any, you don't have to wear any sensors or headset in order to be tracked. But then the next level, I guess, is perhaps using a headset like the Oculus Rift, um, or Oculus, the Quest or Quest 2, and being able to use controllers and the headset, and using those kind of 3 points to do a bit of inverse kinematics, so that you're able to track your head movement and orientation, your hand movement and its orientation, but also using um, a bit of calculation, trying to guess or assume where your foot placement might be due to how you're leaning forward. So your avatar starts to walk. But in some cases, if you don't need to walk, then it's a good way of just having a seated avatar and just having your arms move around. But I guess the most fun, and this is great because Goldsmiths also have a motion capture suite in our lab, courtesy of OptiTrack and Motive. We are able to have full body tracking, so wearing a motion capture suit, and we have 12 OptiTrack cameras that are picking up on the small bulb sensors that are on the suit, and that is giving real-time capture of movement data, and that can be saved, and we can use that in programs such as Maya and Blender, or even Unity 3D to animate an avatar with the correct humanoid rigging to move as as you move. This can be in real time, or it can be saved as kind of canned or pre-saved animation that you play on an avatar, um, and that can be used as an NPC or non-playable character or an agent in a scene which is being which can be triggered to respond at certain times. So there's a lot of flexibility about in terms of what it's been used for after the recording's been done, but there's many different ways in which you can kind of capture your movement for an avatar in real time. So it's quite interesting, quite fun as well.
I would imagine that's really fun. And I love the idea of the synchronization of lip and arm movement, really giving someone a sense of ownership of that avatar as they're moving through whatever world they are in whatever facet they're using this. And I imagine the stronger the technology gets with that, just, I mean, you look at games compared to what I was playing when I was a kid, you really do have this ownership and movement that feels so real. And that's so cool.
Absolutely.
So are you in this suite? Are you just like have this body tracking stuff on and you're just walking around doing different movements, dancing, whatever?
Well, when it comes to motion capture, usually for my research, it's to get very realistic motion data for my avatar or for my agents in the scene, because one of the interesting things about some of the research that I do, it relies heavily on the illusion of plausibility. So that means that the user feels like the events happening in VR are, even though on a level they know that it's computer generated, and they're not that they're not really there, because of that, because they are able to feel like the events happening are really happening to them due to perhaps having a high realistic setting, having really realistic interactions within that space, having really responsive feedback from the environment as well. So what they're doing there is being acknowledged by the space. Their interactions are being acknowledged and responded to in real time in that space, and maybe even contextually in terms of the nature of the space. So as I mentioned before, I'm looking at the medical the medical space, and how VR or embodiment can help in that area of communication training. So it's really important that if I'm working with doctors, that they believe that the scenario is is what it would look like in their day to day, that the agents that they're interacting with are realistic and able to provide a quite realistic and responsive communication and conversation. Their body movement is matching the fidelity of how they look. So there's a balance between kind of visual fidelity and motion fidelity. And if we're using really realistic avatars, we have to make sure that the motion the motion fidelity matches that, or there's an immediate break in plausibility, and that can affect how they respond. So in order to use kind of those spaces as training, and for that training to actually map out to the real world, then we need to make sure that that plausibility is isn't broken, or else it just becomes another experience, and that link to now that skill being transferable to their real, their real life, that breaks away. And research does show that having that high plausibility does help with that transfer of skills, which makes it such an effective use case, certainly.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the training because you had said that, but to give our listeners a concrete example of what that training could look like in the medical field, I was looking into some of your research as far as general practitioners identifying signs of child abuse,
Yes. Yes. Oh, so
which
yeah.
watching the
Oh,
video on that was fascinating. Things that someone could watch out for and train to pick up on those signs. So that's something like an example of training that someone could be going through using this technology.
yeah. So that was a really interesting study, and that was done alongside UCL, where I was a research assistant, and um, the art of picking up signs that a child may be suffering from abuse at home it's not really easily taught, and it's also very difficult to study as well. That's what made, having that controlled space within a virtual environment, really gave doctors a chance to have a space to practice those skills, especially when it includes a child as well. Um, uh, in a repetitive manner, and in a way that um, gives them a space not to kind of have any distractions or interruptions that may usually interfere with, the skill in real life. And the results of that were quite interesting as well, which kind of show that less GPs that are less stressed and less neurotic or more agreeable tend to be better at raising potential child abuse issues in their notes, which they're trained to do. So it was really a study that was trying to find whether how much stress a GP is under, and whether some personality traits may have a correlation of how well they're able to pick up on these skills. And um, it was a really good example of what we were talking about, which is how plausibility can really provoke people to respond in a way that they would in real life. I remember watching back as participants came in, and it's interesting to see how the stress that the scenario can put upon a doctor, stuttering and pausing to calm down, and you can really tell that the emotion that they're going through and responding to within that state is real, which makes it again such a good uh, use case for VR, and it's something that I'm really excited about kind of exploring further.
Yeah, listeners, I encourage you to check out Tara's website. It's www.taracwilliams.com, and a lot of the research is on there. A lot of the stuff she's working on is on there, specifically the video we're talking about right now. I was stressed out watching it, just watching the research video, and seeing how a doctor might react to this parent who, is exuding signs of child abuse. And again, I think in my mind, and probably in a lot of people's minds, when they hear VR or AR, they're thinking gaming, metaverse, but not the training that it could be used for, which is huge because I would think in the past you have, people are watching movies, or reading the information, but to actually be immersed in a situation and need to react in real time, feeling like you're actually there, is just a game changer.
No, absolutely.
Fascinating. Did you always know that you wanted to do this? I mean, when did you start taking this path?
Well, it's interesting. I wasn't always techie. So I think I first wanted to become an author, then a fashion designer, then a 3D modeler. I love playing games and I love creating worlds, either in story or uh, poems and drawing. I used to like create stories and then draw my characters with them. And I wanted to kind of create my own kind of 3D worlds. And I went to study creative computing at Goldsmiths University for my undergraduate program. And it was only in my final year that um, I think the first development kit came out. So the DK1 Oculus headset came out. It's funny, I still have it with me. And it is when you look back at the kind of resolution and things like that, which were possible back then, it's quite amazing how far we've come. Um, but I did a experiment then in my final year. I was obsessed with Tomb Raider, so I created a island where you're supposed to go through and avoid obstacles, but I was really interested in how real I can make the experience. So I remember I had fans in the room and scents in the room that looked like, felt like to make the person feel like they're wandering through a forest. And I just remember feeling how intriguing this space was, how engaged and immersed people got, even at that time, with the technology that was available, which was still great. And when I left university and I graduated, I that enthusiasm and excitement for VR just never faded. I went to an internship which was teaching HTML, different computer security and things like that to different private sectors. And I remember being an intern and trying to still build VR versions of the the facility that we have, saying that, oh, it'll be interesting to try in VR. Like, what if we um put this in VR? So it was just, I was literally obsessed. Maybe uh a bit early, but about the capabilities of what VR can bring. And then I was told about the Intelligent Games and Games Intelligent PhD program by my previous personal tutor at Goldsmiths. And he was like, why don't you, continue, looking at VR on this program? And I thought, oh, this couldn't come at a better time. And I jumped at the opportunity to do so. So I started looking at embodiments in VR, and I haven't looked back since.
I would have imagined you would be in tech, like you said, you weren't very techy. I would have imagined it started earlier, but I think that's so cool that you just, had all these different paths and ideas of what you wanted to do and landed with what seems to be a true passion. Um, so that's very cool. So I do want to say and let people know because I thought this was a very cool achievement. You were one of the youngest people to be accepted into the IGGI program. This was a few years
Yes.
back. So what was this program? What was this program about? Was this the program that kind of started to get you on your way?
Yes, absolutely. So the EPSRC Center of Doctoral Training in Intelligent Games and Games Intelligence, just putting the full title out there.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you. There's a lot of acronyms flying in this
yeah,
world, and I'm
yeah.
like, what do
Please
this
Google.
mean?
Please check out the website. They're still going. It's the world's largest PhD research program aimed at games. So their mission is to unlock the full potential of games research, which not only looks at just the entertainment value, but looking at how it contributes to well-being, prosperity, and science, and that includes areas from that looks like um, game AI and player experience, and of course, play for health, education, and also immersive technology, which is where I placed myself and my interests. So they're based over the University of York, Queen Mary Goldsmiths and Essex. They have a great team aboard, that give a lot of support to everyone across, the different universities. They always have a vibrant group, and yeah, I really enjoyed, and my experience there. It really opened my eyes. My idea of what a PhD would look like was completely shattered when I actually joined the program. Most people think it's like, at your desk, very isolated experience, but I've never traveled as much. I've never met so much people from, my field and, uh, related areas, um, through this experience. And it's just been so rewarding. So rewarding.
I bet. I'm curious if I mean, you talk a lot about equity and consistency when you talk about understanding psychological impact of embodiment, right? So you're trying to figure out how people can better identify um, because of the synchronization, right? And like have that ownership. Do you find yourself kind of constantly studying human behavior and movement just in your day to day when you're out in the world?
Yeah, it's interesting, because again, a lot of these social cues that we look at, it feeds into the cycle of how we understand social behavior in real life, right? So, like I mentioned before, gaze behavior, proximity, it all kind of feeds into each other. Understanding of how that works in real life is kind of the fundamental um, threshold of how we kind of analyze and look at how this could be represented or can't be represented in these virtual spaces. So yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes I do find myself like speaking to people and being like looking at the kind of eye contact, looking at how people mimic people's behaviors, because I'm like, oh, this is what I looked at and researched when I was looking at kind of social cues for this VR um experiment that I did. And so it's made me very much more aware of the nonverbal communication that happens in different conversations. And yeah, I thankfully I'm very quiet about my observations.
I know. I'm like, what did she pick up on from me when we met? What?
It's like, huh, you are agreeing with me right now. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you're like a
You have
behavioral
interest in my
scientist.
conversation, yeah.
That's so
No,
cool.
yeah, but I mean, I have no psychology background, and again, that's what makes this space so interesting because it's very interdisciplinary. So I work alongside people from the kind of psychological department, sorry, and neuroscience and things like that. So you learn so much from doing something. I can do an experiment and I can be like, oh, these results are interesting. I have, what does this mean? And this is when, you work together to kind of find, what what insights you can pull out. And sometimes it's not your experience that can help to really delve into this data. It's someone from a different field, and so you just learn so much. And it helps not just in VR development but also understanding psychology and things like that. So yeah, it's really cool.
Very cool. So cool. So what was I just going to say? Listeners, if you have any questions for Tara, raise your hand. We can try to answer them. Well, she can try to answer them because I'm of no use to you in this world. But how about some of the current challenges? Can you share any challenges that you're coming up against right now in this world as the technology is just coming along so quickly? Some challenges that you're up against that you're kind of trying to figure out right now?
um I guess the challenge is, I guess, keeping up with all these, advancements. Like technology is moving at such a fast pace, but I guess it's also as much as it's a challenge, it's also quite motivating and exciting because that means that okay, there's another thing that I need to look into. There's more that I need to explore here. Every time you put research out there, that you're always met with more questions, right? So it just never stops really. So you look at perhaps something in terms of um social behavior in VR and you unlock, okay, well, this is interesting. So now what's next? Okay, this is a challenge. This didn't really work. Why didn't it work? And now you have maybe a new headset with eye tracking, and now, okay, well, this now could possibly be a technology that can help with looking at gaze, how the gaze behavior works and how this signifies different cues in terms of conversation, or maybe even in terms of optimizing, like how the Apple Vision Pro has technology which really tracks where you're focusing on the screen, so that more of the kind of processing power is working towards making that resolution the best, and the rest of the peripheral is decreased. So those are the kind of technologies that you're really excited about. It's like, okay, great, that's useful. How does this now help in other areas? So I guess it just doesn't stop, and there's always a new question and a new challenge, but it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, ever advancing, right? Ever advancing the technology.
Ever advancing,
And
absolutely.
you're doing that to yourself because you solve one problem and then you're just on to the next one.
Yeah, the mind never stops. Just like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, this is interesting. I think that's the
Ever questioning. I think that's
ever
great.
questioning. Absolutely.
So you
Absolutely.
said you got excited about the capabilities that VR can bring. I mean, how do you think this is gonna continue to kind of change the world and how we live in the world?
Oh, that's such a big question. I
I
don't
know,
even know where to
sorry, and I
begin.
actually didn't include that on the list for you. So sorry to lob that one in. Just a small
Um,
question for you.
well, I guess it has so much implications in different sectors. Like for me, in terms of training and learning, I'm really interested and um, quite passionate about, how accessible XR is, in terms of bringing it into, different communities where perhaps they can't afford the high end, headsets, and looking at different communities in which maybe there isn't yet a built a ecosystem for VR and or AR, and how now that can be how that can we can onboard that, how we can onboard people into using that, and how it's useful for their for the community. So I guess I'm really excited about not only just you know the high end systems, but also um, the um, the different other headsets that are coming out, which I think uh, Zapbox just released a new mixed reality headset just using your phone, and a lightweight headset, which allows for easier onboarding onto looking at development both in AR and VR. The Oculus Quest 2 was almost the same price as your mobile phone. So the way in which users can get their hands on and start using these technologies is becoming more and more accessible. And I guess one of the questions I think that I was reading up on the new headset that's out, and it's like kind of like, who is it for? With it's as exciting as it is in terms of kind of opening a new door for kind of spatial computing, the price also doesn't reflect that yet, right? So it's just like, okay, how do we have all these, or how long is the wait for us to be able to have that in a very accessible price and manner, and onboard people onto using such incredible technology? So yeah, I think in the future, I'm sure those are the kind of questions and battles that we're going to face. But I'm also very excited about um, the new technology in terms of what it means for us being able to express ourselves in these virtual spaces a lot more realistically. So a lot more of our own gestures and gaze movement and body language is now being able to be picked up and expressed in these virtual environments and meetings. to, to make us feel more that our digital identity is more realistic and it fits who we want, how we want to represent ourselves, whether it be photorealistic or using an avatar, which is that we have more control, I guess, going forward on how what our identity is going to look like on these virtual platforms, and that's quite exciting as well.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
seems the possibilities are endless.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
you might be talking me into looking into one of these headsets or the Oculus or whatnot, because it really is mind blowing what is done these days and how realistic it is. Um, like I said, I've never been a gamer, so I didn't really think about doing that, but this is like a whole new world. It's very cool. I feel like I could talk to you about this all day because it is so fascinating. And I love the idea of, the psychological impact of embodiment and all the work you're doing. But I do need to ask you a bit about CharmVerse now that you've been a brand ambassador for a little bit. So
Sure.
how did that end up happening? Because it was kind of separate from my meeting with you and just fairly serendipitous that you came on board as an ambassador shortly after we met in New York.
Yes, but you did set the ball rolling, because it was actually after our conversation that made me want to look into CharmVerse even more. Um, so when I got back from New York, I also have a CIC, a company that called Black XR Network, which aims to essentially build a space and a platform for more visibility and opportunities for Black creatives and and XR enthusiasts to kind of network, collaborate, upskill, and be visible. And I was just in the process of building and deciding how that community is going to look like, how we're going to come together, how I could easily kind of onboard people onto these technologies and also give them an understanding of Web3 as well. So I was, scrolling through the CharmVerse website and I saw like a bright light, the ambassador program, and I thought this is exactly what I needed. I think that in terms of just the support that I've been given so far in the events that I've run, I ran a event in Ghana online, and CharmVerse was a great space for kind of having visibility on that. I really think that the rewards and the kind of systems in place in terms of setting up different hackathons and um, uh, different experiences within their platform that are rewarded by perhaps different NFTs and the ability to really customize your space and how people react, how people interact with each other is so good. So I thought that by working with CharmVerse in terms of trying to get people to understand what Web3 and its capabilities are about, hosting hackathons on the platform, getting people to engage in the platform on a continuous basis, really gives them a practical way to understand, especially how NFTs work and how they can be used. Because for some, it's really just this buzzword and exciting digital asset, but it's so much more than that. It can be used for so much more. And yeah, I'm just really excited about the future work that we're going to do together. I'm at the moment building and working towards doing a hackathon on the CharmVerse platform, and I'm currently building my kind of community space on there. So definitely really excited about how this is going to look in the future.
Ooh, I love to hear that. And I love to hear that. So it sounds like you've been using it partly as like a coordination collaboration hub, maybe for some of the events
Yep.
that you've been doing. Tara mentioned hackathons, and I failed to mention that when I said how we met each other. CharmVerse was hosting the hackathon that she was participating in New York. CharmVerse was hosting that and kind of hosting all the information and the submissions from the hackers, and that kind of kicked off CharmVerse being a platform for hackathons. So I'm glad to hear you're using it. And I'm also glad that you mentioned NFTs. It can be a buzzword. People see it as a digital collectible. But when you're talking about it in sense of CharmVerse, listeners, just so you understand how an NFT can be used in CharmVerse, it can be used as like a key to your space. So someone's holding a specific NFT or token, and you can set up a token gate. And now, as long as their wallet is connected, it's making it permissionless for that person, if they're holding the correct token, to now gain access to your space. So in a lot of my Twitter spaces lately, we've been talking about NFTs as more than digital collectibles. And, that the more and more we get into the space, the more utility we're finding that they offer. And I'm just glad that you brought that up.
Absolutely.
Well, if you're ever wanting to share your CharmVerse space with me, I'm always happy to look at people's spaces. I love to see how they're using it. So yeah, feel free to share if you're up for it.
Absolutely.
I feel like a lot of the listeners are probably very curious about the work you do. So would you offer some advice to the researchers out there and future researchers that are making their way in this industry, specifically those that are in the XR world? Any advice for them?
Advice. I guess I would say, depending on where you are in your journey, if you're at the beginning, or even thinking of just jumping into this space, I always say, make sure that you really spend time choosing a good supervisor. My supervisor changed my whole experience. Both of them actually, Sylvia Pan and Marco Gillies, both based at Goldsmiths University. They've been amazing support. Their knowledge and experience has been so valuable in my growth and support in this space. Additionally, I would also say that this is the best time to jump in and explore. Just like we were saying about the burst of the kind of XR tech scene, the release of so much accessible headsets, the growing engagement with artificial intelligence and what that can mean for the metaverse and virtual reality, in terms, not just in terms of uh, generated content, but also in terms of creating realistic avatars. And it's just that area itself can have a whole conversation. But in terms of spatial computing, in terms of pain points of user experience, and especially with user retention in terms of these budding metaverse spaces, there's areas.
Oh, you just cut out. I just
For
lost you.
trial
Are you
and
there?
error. Oh, hello,
Okay.
yellow.
No,
Am I
you're
back?
back. You're back.
Okay,
Yes,
yeah.
it might have been me. I
So
don't know if it was me or you.
so we're in such an exciting space of trial and error. So I think that research is going to be quite invaluable in the years to come, in terms of really figuring out what we're getting right and what we're doing wrong. So definitely don't be afraid to kind of jump in. I always say that also bring your own experience and your own what makes you into this space. Your experience with VR, your experience in engaging with this space, your insight in the space also can make a pivotal change in how things are, the discussions being had, in the right spaces, in the areas that are making decisions, just even culturally. And in terms of your own community, we want people to be very, I guess, very excited about what's happening. And I think follow your passion. Always researching in a passion project will help you through the challenges and the walls that you'll ultimately face during your time as a researcher, because it's not always a straight path. You will definitely hit endings that
Oh, you cut out
you're
again.
passionate about it. Oop. Don't know what's going on, but
No, you're back
I'm
now.
back.
You're back now.
Okay. But definitely just follow your passion
Uh,
and you'll definitely have a great time researching in this space for sure. I'll just end it there before something I get caught up again.
well, I think that's great. Find a good mentor, supervisor. I think that's fantastic. Great to hear that now is a time to get into this space
Yeah.
because, as we heard, it's ever advancing. And being yourself, I love that message too. You know, each person is offering their unique insights, and I think that's really important to bring that to the table. And following your passion. And listeners, I know I'm not alone. You can hear Tara's passion in what she's working on. And I think that's so important, especially in the technological advancement of this industry. So I love it. Okay, so before I let you go,
hmm
what's next for you? What should we be keeping an eye on? You know, do you have any alpha you can drop for us?
Well, please, I would say that there's always something budding in my space. So please do connect with me on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and always feel free to kind of DM me any questions and the sort. Um, at the moment, I do have an event in July 11th with Digital Catapult, with my CIC, the Black XR network. We're hosting a panel and networking event, which is focusing around a bit about what we're talking about, you know, just the future of kind of immersive technology and what that's going to look like. And also, we have a great showcase of XR projects that are being done by, you know, the community, which I'm really excited to share and be a part of. So if you are around in July in London and you want to come along, definitely keep an eye out on my page for the Eventbrite to be released. And yeah, look forward to kind of engaging with you all in the future.
I love it. Listeners, click on Tara's PFP. Be sure to give her a follow. Definitely find her on LinkedIn, Tara Collingwood with an E Williams. And the website, like I said, taracwilliams.com. And also worth the shout out, blackxrnetwork.org. Go check that out. All sorts of really cool things happening. Dig into the research. Like I said, it's fascinating to see, even if you're just looking through some of the photos, really cool to see how they're working on this different technology, this whole new world they're building. So, Tara, so cool. So cool. You've opened my eyes to a whole side of the world that I've never looked into, and I just found myself fascinated by your work.
Thank you for having me. As you have seen, I'm never shy to speak about the stuff that I am doing, and have, you know, very interesting conversations about what's going on in the space. So yeah, thank you everyone for listening and tuning in, and thank you so much for having me. And thank you, CharmVerse. I'm really excited about the work we're going to be doing together.
Me too. And yeah, let's stay in touch, of course. And
Absolutely.
I look forward to continuing our work together. And you've been an absolute pleasure. So thanks again for taking the time. And I'm really
No
excited to
problem.
follow along on all the work you're doing. So thanks
Fabulous.
everyone for tuning in, and have a fantastic rest of your day. And we'll see you next time. Bye,
Take
everyone.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye, Tara.
Bye.